Hello, my name is Robin Johnson, and I have been a cross-border M&A partner at Evershed Sutherland for the last 31 years. I've got a lot of experience in cross-border M&A, and while the process is very similar to a UK M&A, there are some important differences which I want to emphasize during this presentation. In my view, it is absolutely key from before you start that you spec the transaction. And by that I mean scope, process, execute and close. On a cross-border transaction, the scoping of the work is even more important, where it involves more than one jurisdiction and may involve different consents, different issues that might arise in that jurisdiction. Therefore, if you haven't scoped what you're going to do, in order to then process what you're going to do and then execute what you're going to do, you will be struggling. So get the scoping right at the beginning. Let's just go into the basics of what is typically involved on a sell-side M&A transaction, whether it be a cross-border transaction or otherwise. On a sell side, having scoped, you will then need to obtain all relevant due diligence information. And we are seeing an increasing trend, particularly on cross-border transactions, of preparing some sort of vendor due diligence report or fact book where you've identified any issues that might arise on the buy side and you can deal with them immediately up front. So having done some due diligence as a sell-side lawyer, you'll identify the gaps in the information that your client is providing. We often also see on cross-border transactions that it is the seller that prepares the transactional documentation, though this is not always the case, but it would be the case if it was an auction process. And we can talk about what that SPA might look like in a few minutes. Also, if you're using W&I insurance, i.e. where there is limited recourse against the seller in relation to any breach of warranties, which is a very typical situation on deals that we are involved with, then you would have an initial conversation with the broker to identify what sort of warranty and indemnity insurance can be obtained for the deal. However, this will be flipped over to the buyer at the right time, so that the buyer takes out the W&I insurance, but you as the seller have had the initial conversation.